Yo, YouTube, what is good? It's your boy Egg. So real quick, we got some insane tuning coming to this next patch on March 25th, guys. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. So I'm not gonna go over everything. The main idea with this video is to cover, skim through and see what are the biggest changes, the most notable ones. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with Mage because my Mage viewers, we got to be looking at what's going on with that first. So if you guys don't know how patch notes work, there's a PvE section here and then a PvP section here. All the PvE changes will apply to PvP unless it states otherwise. So the first change we have with Mage here, Arcane damage, Frost damage, and Fire damage. Now the Frost and Arcane ones don't apply to don't apply to PvP combat. The Fire Mage one actually applies to PvP combat. For some godforsaken reason, Blizzard keeps nerfing Fire Mages, guys. What is going on? What are we doing with this? I gotta scroll down before I start rambling. But like, Blizzard, if you're watching this, Fire Mage in PvP is one of the most underwhelming classes in PvP right now. I know representation is not tied to viability. Fire Mages wildly underrepresented. But not only that, even the best players on Fire Mage can't really make Fire Mage work. There's like one person making it work right now. It's kind of crazy how it keeps continuously getting nerfed. I don't understand it. Anyways, so for PvP, Mage side of things, developers' notes were adding some reductions to the power of Mage mobility and defenses, with an emphasis on Arcane, which is especially tough to chase. So this is pretty true because Arcane has more movement speed than other classes, than the other Mage specs, with Chrono Shift, and Arcane is also the only Mage spec that really plays Incantation, because the OP barrier, when it blinks, it gives you invisibility, so you'll get that Incantation every time OP barrier breaks and you blink. And also Arcane has the PvP talent, which reduces the cooldown of greater invisibility. So this talent is only viable on Arcane. So Arcane is the most difficult one to chase because of all the movement speed and the OP barrier just giving you that movement speed along with Chrono Shift. So OP barrier is something we're excited to see used. We feel the 5-second duration is too high to encourage the gameplay we want from this talent, which is for enemies to consider waiting for the barrier to expire to continue attacking. We are reducing its duration to encourage that. This also reduces its defensive value, since it has indeed been a bit overpowered. That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I think damage is really high. I think a lot of the times the barrier was breaking in the 1 to 3 second range. So it feels like those last 2 seconds of the barrier weren't, like, if you were timing that barrier well, it feels like those last 2 seconds weren't really like notable. So the fact they're moving it to 4 seconds, I feel like is kind of like a nothing change. It might make the difference on a small percentage of barriers. So there was like some times where the barrier was just about to expire at 5 seconds and like someone would do 1 tick of more damage and it broke. But this was very rare. So I think this doesn't really nerf it too bad. I think this is fine because of how high damage is right now. So additionally, they're nerfing some more mage-wide things. So these are in the left side of the tree. Barrier diffusion, which is the talent that whenever your barrier is broken, it reduces the cooldown by 4 seconds. This will now be 2 seconds, which is still relevant. Like, you'll still play this, I believe. So this isn't like too bad, but it is going to nerf how many barriers you will be able to produce a little bit. Accumulative shielding is now 33% effective. This was already nerfed in half, I think. Now it's 33. So they just nerfed it by like 12% more or something, or 17 rather. No one really even played this talent because it's like, while your shield is active, your barrier recharges at like a greater rate. But since you're playing OP barrier, your shield is not really on very often. So this talent was kind of not good. So they nerfed kind of a dead talent already. Temporal velocity is now 50% effectiveness, or sorry, now 50% effective in PvP. So this was whenever you blinked, you got 10% movement speed, and whenever you canceled, or sorry, whenever you would alter back, you would get 20% movement speed. I think those are the numbers. Now it's going to be 5% and 10% movement speed. So, I mean, this was pretty good. It wasn't broken, I don't think, but now it's just going to be less good. A lot of the times that movement speed would not really matter. I don't think it's going to really do much. And then the incantation of swiftness, now 50% effective. That just means you're going to be slower. Like, you're not going to get as much movement speed. Which, again, no one really played this except Arcane, so this is kind of a direct Arcane nerf. Then for the Arcane specific changes, Chrono Shift now increases movement speed by 10%, was 25. That is quite a big nerf. This used to be 50%, by the way. It was nerfed to 25. They thought it was still too OP. Now they nerfed it to 10%. So I always thought of Chrono Shift more as like my barrage applies a slow ever since they nerfed the movement speed on it. Now I think at 10%, I mean, it's still going to be nice to take for the slow, but you might not take this anymore and just play normal slow, which is, I mean, not taking Chrono Shift is kind of nice in a way because it opens up a PvP talent. So you'll be able to play Ice Wall, OP Barrier, and then either Short Wall or Master Shepherd now. So Chrono Shift feels like it's less of a lock-in, which I kind of like, gives more flexibility. And then, let's see, Slippery Slangin' is now 50%. This was, Slippery Slingin'. Oh, that's whenever you have Alter up or Evo, I think. So whenever you're channeling Evo or whenever you're in Alter, you would get 40% movement speed. Now it's going to be 20%. So you might just play the Displace has longer range and longer duration buff now. So another movement speed decrease on Arcane. Which, I mean, it's less fun, but it's probably not going to do too much. Arcane's, now this is the biggest one in my opinion. Arcane Surge now increases spell damage by 15%. In PvP combat was 20. So your main modifier is going to give you less damage. So that's kind of a big, like, 5% doesn't seem like a lot, but keep in mind it was 25% like a while back. Now it's 15, so it's Arcane's going to be doing a significantly less amount of damage, I think, from this. Like, the burst is not going to be as bursty. And then they buffed the initial hit of Arcane Surge, which again is kind of nothing. You never really surged. Like, the initial hit of Surge was never scary. Now it might just do like a little bit more. Maybe that matters. I don't know. It's hard to tell. And then this is simply, you don't play Spellslinger on Frost, so it's kind of a nothing change there as well. Now, I'm going to go over some of the most OP classes and what's changing with them. So Disc is getting a mana nerf. That's going to severely hurt Disc. And then Evangelism was kind of their AoE lay on hands talent. So significantly less burst healing. And then they nerfed the tier set, which I found interesting. Like the force that's not even really out yet, and it's nerfed. So we'll see if that matters. But then you look at Holy Priest, and Holy Priest is actually getting some substantial buffs. 8% on Palm, 8% on Sanctify, which, I mean, whatever, right? 8% on Serenity is huge. Heal, 8%, not bad. Flash Heal, 8% is huge. And now mana regeneration is now nerfed by 50, was 65, so Holy Priest mana was always a problem. I think Holy Priest had some of like the worst mana. So that's gonna be significantly less of a problem now. And then keep in mind, these are just the PvP changes. When we scroll up, we can see Holy also got a substantial amount of healing increases that are not disabled in PvP. So Palm, an additional 20, that's huge. That's 28 total %. Holy Fire damage, which is huge, because H-Priest is a very offensive healer with Chast Fear. Now they can provide more damage on the go. Renews got a lot of buffs. I think this is like all renew buffs here. So that's going to be a lot more passive healing. Prayer of Mending, more healing increase and more damage increase. So that's a lot. Then we also have Divine Image, which I don't know if people are playing right now, but that talent could be good again. Lightwell also don't think people are playing that. That could be good again. More Renew healing, 60%. And then, yeah, again, Palm 20%. So Holy Priest could definitely be a viable healer now. Ret Paladins might be on the come up because they got Final Verdict 20%. And then Blinding Light no longer removes dots. That's a huge solo shuffle buff to that because a lot of dot classes would get affected by these Pallies randomly blinding all their dots off and stuff. But on the flip side, you also are now going to get blinded with like all these dots on you, and you're just going to die in the blind. So that's also a huge buff there. And then, yeah, Rets are getting a Wings buff, Blade of Justice, and Divine Protection defensive buff. So that's pretty cool. No rogue nerfs, really. I mean, Outlaw got Preemptive Maneuver, which was whenever you would faint and get stunned. It would give you 40% DR, and this was really OP on Outlaw because they have CDR and faint, cooldown reduction. So now it's only going to be 15%. That makes a lot of sense for Outlaw. Mistweavers could be on the come up here. Lots of healing buffs here. I think these are relevant spells to buff as well. Now, Windwalkers. Windwalkers were very OP in PvP. So they randomly buffed the healing of Celestial, which I don't even know if a large portion of these Windwalkers even knew that Celestial Conduit also healed, other than one-shotting. They nerfed the damage on that last patch. Now they're just buffing the healing on it to compensate. And then they're nerfing the Crackle, which Crackle does a lot of damage right now. And that's like a 25% nerf, I believe. So that's going to maybe... You maybe won't play this now. And then this is the biggest one here. Slicing Winds was hitting like 4 million at the top end. And now it's going to be 15% nerfed. I'm actually surprised they didn't change the cooldown of it. I thought the cooldown would be the biggest nerf that they could do because it lines up perfectly with your Strike of the Windlord, which applies Gale Force, which really like increases the damage even more. But I think if they increase the cooldown, it would make the class feel a lot less fun. So I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. I'm glad they just approached it with the damage. So it's going to be less one-shotty now, which is going to be, like I said, a good change. Ferals were another OP class here. They nerfed the movement speed of Tireless. This was so annoying. If they just kept shifting in and out of cat form, they would just be a NASCAR like Arcane Mage was with Chrono Shift. So I'm glad they're kind of like tackling that a little bit. And then they nerfed their MS by 4%, which is not really going to matter. This feels like they kind of like tickled Feral a little bit. I don't think it's going to be like a big deal. Boomy's huge defensive buffs. Regeneration, Frenzy Regeneration, no longer reduced by 38%. That's insane. So a lot of survivability. And then dot damage increase. I think Boomy might have got some stuff up here too. Let's go check. Yeah, they got Wrath damage and Star Surge damage. And I'm not sure if this one's relevant or not. So we'll try to find another class here. I think Prez got some good stuff. This is a huge increase to healing here. That's a blanket healing increase. And then they increased the damage of Disintegrate. And then the Living Flame one does not apply. And then for Prez down here in the PvP section, they got some more stuff, I think. Actually, doesn't look like they did. Nope. Okay. So just a little bit of a healing buff for Prez. So we might see more Prez Evokers now. DKs, they just made them a little tankier into melee classes, which is something they honestly needed. Some relevant PvP changes here. All healing is now reduced by 10% in Battleground Blitz. That's just some dampening added to Blitz. Healers were maybe too strong. Teamfights were going on too long or something. And 2v2 matches, regardless of starting at high dampening, still went 7-8 minutes long sometimes. So they're adding additional healing reduction to 2v2. So now games will not go on as long, which I'm kind of excited for. I think 2 smashes were lasting way too long. Arms Warrior, huge buffs. Execute 25%, Bladestorm 20%, Demolish 15%. I'm personally excited for this because I would much rather fight arms than Fury. I don't know. Like, when warriors are strong, the game can be interesting, but this is actually subtly a mage buff as well. Because the more warriors in the meta, the more warriors in your soul shuffle lobbies, the easier time you're going to have on mage. So this is an exciting change as well. Enhancement, I think a lot of enhancements are saying this is actually a overall nerf because they're buffing the abilities that were doing 1 to 5% of your damage, and they're nerfing the bursty spells. So maybe enhance gets a little weaker. And then I think Ellie, this change, I'm not sure if that actually does anything, but then I think Ellie also got some stuff up here. Lava burst damage 8%, that's a big buff. And then they're doing some weird stuff to Primwave. I'm not sure if that matters, but when a spell is so weak, like let's take Scorch for example, or Backstab, these are spells that need to be modified by like hundreds of %, and it usually still doesn't account to anything. I'm assuming Primwave will probably be similar with that. And Shadow got a tiny nerf. I think some people were saying Shadow Priest is OP right now. I'm not sure I agree, but I think this is a kill shot nerf for Hunters. They also nerfed the Forset, which I'm not entirely sure what that does, but it's nerfed in half now. Well, actually by 25% now. And I think Mark's got some stuff up here as well. I'm not sure what's happening to Hunter. Let's read their notes. Dark Ranger? I believe that's the one they all play. Black Arrow, yeah. So they're like, I don't know if this is a buff to Maybe you guys in the chat will know, but Marksmanship Hunters, giant question mark for me. Beast Mastery Hunters, again, don't really know. Survival, these seem like buffs. Damage increase. And I believe that's kind of all. Maybe Aug 15% on all spells and abilities. I don't know if that's going to be enough to bring Aug back into the meta, but I would have to guess maybe some Aug evokers out there might be pretty happy about this. And I actually don't mind when Aug is in the meta, believe it or not. I don't think Aug is too annoying to fight most of the time. And Devastation evokers, let's read their notes here. The tier set bonus was too strong. Okay, so let's see. Increase the damage of your next empowered spell by 25%, was 20, so small buff there. More triggers on the 2-piece. That's a 100% effectiveness Shattering Star, so that's pretty strong. That's the spell that buffs their damage when it's on you. Let's see if they got anything in the PvP section. No evoker changes. I think that's pretty much all the relevant stuff. So I think H-Pal's got some big buffs, I think, because H-Pal's kind of struggling right now. My personal opinion is that, like, I'm okay with, we had an H-Pal meta last season. I'd rather them not be the S tier healer again for another season, but I also don't want them to be irrelevant. So this is probably needed. So hopefully, all these healers getting big buffs and stuff makes more healers want to queue up the solo chefs. Queues will be less long. Overall, I think this patch is really positive, and I'm looking forward to it, guys. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little breakdown. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about all these changes. Like I said, I think it's pretty good. I think they probably missed some stuff, but overall, I think the patch is going to be really good when it comes out. I'm excited for it. I hope you guys are too. That's all for this video, and peace out.